Welcome to another live stream, Legends. Well, guys, Bitcoin took another little tumble today. Nothing all too crazy, to be honest, at least in my opinion, as we had a bearish Stuber setup last night on the 5-minute that looked, well, like a textbook Stuber to me that played out in full today. Love to see market structure respecting market structure like that, but I want to take a look at Bitcoin on multiple different time frames. Going to look at the weekly, the 4-hourly, and then zoom into the more degen levels just to get an overall feel for the market. And of course, I will take altcoin requests and that sort of thing for you guys. So if you guys here with me have any altcoin requests or questions, by all means, throw them in the chat. If you do have altcoin requests, please include the ticker, just in case it's not obvious, and time frame you mostly focus on because everyone looks at different time frames. But with that, let's hop right into it. So basically on the shorter time frame, at least we do have some sort of a bullish reversal here on the 5-minute. Just again, looking at typical Stuber fibs, whether you wanted to say, if you really want to look at the microstructure, we have that low, and we did push a little bit lower after that support, and we ended up breaking that high, right? But lately, more so even, I've been change the rules slightly just to have at least two of the opposite color candle before, well, before getting that lower low, basically. So even if you wanted to consider this, oh, I keep changing the color on myself. If we wanted to consider that our low and then this our lower low, either way, we have a confirmed lower high here, which was broken. So at that point, that's where I basically like to pull a fib, right? Pulling a fib from our low point to basically just chasing the price, right? I mean, even if you wanted to do that one, there was a very micro one there where we did test back to the 786 right there. So those of you guys who have been in this community for quite some time, you guys are quite familiar with my Stuber fib strategy and just how you start to see them in all sorts of shapes and sizes. So obviously not everybody wants to take a scalp on this kind of an entry, but basically market structure is market structure. So whether it's a small range or a big range, 5-minute, a 1 hour, a 4 hour, a daily, a weekly, whatever, I always treat market structure the same. You know, if we are setting higher highs, then we have confirmed higher lows on the trend, which I like to pull fibs for, looking for those retracements, because most traders love trading into breakouts, but most traders also generally get wrecked, right? So whenever we have a bullish confirmation like breaking a high and getting that bullish structure, most people like to FOMO into a position on that sort of thing, whereas I would always rather wait for some sort of a pullback, and that's the whole foundation behind a Stuber fib, right? Just like I was saying, if we treated this as our lower high on the trend, and then we end and then we end up breaking that, a lot of people would be wanting to long right here, but we can get significantly better risk reward, just better risk management in general if we wait for a pullback, right? So that's where I basically pull a fib and just chasing the market structure until we end up, like, I don't know when exactly we're going to see our pullback, but basically when we get back to that 786, that's where I'm interested in starting to get into a position, right? So this is just a textbook example where we break that structure, come down, test the 786 and actually the 886. So you'd hit 2 of my 4 laddered entries basically. And this is basically, you would have your first 2 take profits, right? The first profit being the 0.5 fib, second one being the 214. So in a case like that, just another beautiful setup. And from there, if you had taken this, and to be clear, I actually never took this long. I never saw it ahead of time. I was busy earlier working on something else, so I ended up missing this. But the structure is there. That's just a very typical Stuber fib setup, and those of you guys who have been in my streams many times before, that'll look very familiar to you guys. But generally speaking, I like to let half of a position run just in case it turns into a home run trade, right? However I pull my fib, that is where my first targets are. I always treat my, basically when I look for an entry, I'm always playing the range first. So if I pull a fib that is this size, that is the size of the range, and I'm going to start taking profits in the range I'm playing and hope for a breakout second. Not banking on the breakout, right? Playing the range first, making sure I lock in profits, making sure I reduce risk, and if a home run trade happens from there with part of the position, fantastic. If not, at least you've paid yourself and removed your risk from the market, basically. So looking good right there. Even if we end up seeing another bit of a pullback just because we've been setting new highs, still, this is still my confirmed bullish pivot point currently on the trend until it breaks, right? So at this point, even if we pull back, you guys know that generally I only like to play the same Stuber fib once, but it would actually be a new setup completely if we ended up retesting it now, just because we've set a significantly higher high, right? So at this point, even if we pull back, at least we have potential support on the 5-minute, basically starting around 65.4K, running down to about 64.8K. And if we lose that, I would consider this support basically wrecked and continue the downtrend from there. But so far, still riding a short that I took from this bearish Stuber last night, and basically same thing, right? At this is basically the last high, higher low, right? When we set that higher high, that's where we confirmed our higher low. And then after we lose that structure like that, this is my confirmed bearish point for a Stuber fib. So that's where I was pulling my fib from, basically until we bottom. And or basically just chasing the price until we end up back at the 786 like I was talking about before. That's my short. Boom. First target. Never updated my stop loss to break even, so I rode it out through this. I had already taken some profits, so I knew even if I got stopped out, at least I had a cushion there from the profits I had taken, as well as a smaller position that would have got stopped out if it happened, right? So it's just another just making sure to lock in profits at profit levels is so important, because it just helps with that risk management so much, right? Now that obviously we have ended up hitting my second target level on that kind of a short, at this point my stop loss is break even on the rest of my position. So we'll just see how the rest plays out from there. So far it's a great trade, and just a typical Stuber fib setup once again, right? So at this point we'll have to see what happens. Just looking at the very micro structure here on the 5-minute, just how this has kind of played out. We have currently, this would be our high and higher high, just because we did see this little pullback. So the lowest point between the two is my confirmed higher low on the trend. And basically, if this uptrend is going to remain intact, I would expect us to hold support around here. Let's just pull a fib. Maybe it'll even have it, right? Like, so far we're respecting the 786 absolutely perfectly, right? So again, it's not that everyone's going to trade this size of structure, for example, but just to show you how well structure does get respected, right? Let's zoom into the 1-minute, and you can just see we came down to the 786 perfect. And then we'll have to see. We could still obviously come down lower. It could also end up breaking the trend, but we're already getting very close to that 0.5 fib target. Yeah, it's just crazy how you see that structure on so many different time frames and all sorts of shapes and sizes, like I said. So basically at this point, if we do end up losing this higher low, and let's say we end up trending to the downside from there, losing that structure, that's where we could now pull some bearish scalp setup and look for something like that, right? Because if we end up losing this support, that's where, yeah, a bounce is very likely, but I would be looking for a retracement to that resistance level, right? So I would have something like this, and notice that my eyeball's kind of drawn to that zone after trading this strategy so often for the last couple of years here. So that would be a potential bearish setup, but again, we actually have to lose this confirmed higher low structure before I would consider that type of a setup. What's up, Rab? Good to see you, brother. Just out of curiosity, I just want to have this fib up to see if this does end up getting respected. If we just, well, yeah, actually we're hitting the 0.5 fib already. So technically even that little microstructure still respects the 786 basically, right? Front run it a little bit, but very, very close. Crazy how well that works. Let's take a look at the Trendmaster indicator. See, I assume we've broken a lower sell signal by this point. No, we'd have not broken a lower sell signal at this point. So basically how I would be looking at this Again, for those of you familiar with my streams, you guys kind of know how I look at the Trendmaster indicator, probably my favorite indicator. But it's not so much that I take every individual signal all too serious, but I more so like to see which way they are trending. And at this time, the fact that we ended up losing this buy signal and setting this sell signal, we have now printed a significantly lower buy signal. So even though it's a buy signal, it is fighting the trend, right? So I don't want to give that all too much credit based on that. Not a ton of bullish confluence with this signal for myself, how I like to look at it. But something I would be interested in, just since we do have that little warning that this trend could be facing the downside here once again, I'd be interested in pulling a fib from basically where we got our pivot, where we ended up getting that sell signal from basically, and pulling a fib, something like that. Let me just get this guy off here so I can, yeah, somewhere around there. So yeah, basically, if we end up coming up to this level here, up to my Stuber fibs, which would start around 67.6K, and that resistance would run up to 68.9K approximately. If we come up to this level and we end up printing a lower sell signal on the Trendmaster, I think that would be very strong confluence for a continuation to the downside on the lower time frame, like the 5 minute like this, obviously. So something to watch for there. Let's zoom out a little bit. Let's check out the 4 hour. Some of you guys may have seen my post in the Pro Signals earlier this morning. Basically, the trend, it's been such an... I hate to say this because I know a lot of people get wrecked in downtrends because it's very hard to turn off the noise, especially if you're on social media trying to find an advantage and listening to big influencers who are just like to dish out the clickbait that's moon boy mentality only, or people that have been trying to trade fundamentals and saying how bullish the fundamentals are and how, oh, you know, gold and silver have pumped, so Bitcoin is going to follow it now. Why is Bitcoin lagging behind it? Guys, I want to make something clear here. Bitcoin went on a 700% run to the upside before gold and silver made their run. So the people who are telling you that Bitcoin is lagging and it's going to catch up, if anything, I personally think it's gold and silver that were playing catch up. I don't know. I'm happy to be wrong about that. I'm happy to go parabolic, but to me, it just really feels like everyone has that exactly backwards in their head. And to be honest, most traders do have things backwards in their head. So, you know, something to consider there is that Bitcoin went for a very nice bull market, right? Everyone's saying this bull market sucked. Bitcoin went up 700% from the lows. It's just unfortunate so many people wait to hear about it in the media and wait to FOMO in after all-time highs and stuff like that. So yeah, the bull market doesn't feel that long if that's the kind of thing that you've done, right? And there's no judgment here, you guys. I know I've pointed this out to many people in the past. Where was it? I got into trading crypto right about here. So literally, guys, if any of you guys FOMO'd into the crypto market at the absolute highs, understand I've been there. I have done that. But lessons learned along the way. Rather than giving up, I learned how to read charts rather than listening. Because, I mean, I got absolutely wrecked my first cycle to the downside listening. I was constantly looking for that bullish hopium in the media, and I would just find what I wanted to find, and I would listen to all these bullish fundamentals. Guys, the fundamentals are always getting better for crypto. Even in bear markets, there's always things being built. But unless the market structure actually agrees with those bullish fundamentals, then unfortunately we need to look at the market structure first, and if the fundamentals align with that, fantastic. But at this point, to say that we're bullish just because, you know, a certain world leader has promised certain things or whatever, that's not necessarily the case, right? Just look at the structure getting absolutely wrecked. Here is basically where we lost the uptrend on the weekly. And I've been very vocal ever since that I really thought that this market cycle was over. There was several different confluences that, you know, it was just looking really bad. You know, the fact that we ended up losing horizontal support, diagonal support, we had this swing fail that everybody was FOMOing into. Adrian, I know you and I were shorting into this swing fail pocket here. It's not that I was bearish at the time. I was just looking at the market from a straight up a risk reward point of view, right? Does it make more sense to long right here with an invalidation down here? Or does it make more sense to short right here with an invalidation right here? For some reason, it's not drawing my lines. There we go. But yeah, that was just specifically for risk reward, right? But ever since that, we obviously, like I said, broke horizontal support, broke diagonal support. Just even at this point, even with this weekly flush here, there's already people claiming that the bottom is in, you guys. There was people claiming the bottom was in like 2 hours after finding a bottom here. There is absolutely nothing that looks even remotely fucking bullish on this macro chart, you guys. I'm sorry. Actually, there is one thing. I will give credit where credit is due. The RSI is in oversold territory. Now, in a strong downtrend, generally that just means that there is a lot of selling pressure. Just like, generally speaking, the best part of a bull market is when the RSI is overbought, right? When we are above the 70 level, I mean, that's where the run really gets started, right? However, being that crypto as a whole is generally in an uptrend, right? Over the last decade or decade and a half, whatever, generally in an uptrend. So the RSI overbought actually means a lot of strength. Whereas whenever we get down to this 30 level, that's generally when the market ends up finding bottom or very close to it, sometimes getting a bullish divergence like this. But that oversold signal does tend to actually mean oversold just because we've been in such an uptrend. Obviously that can change. Like I said, it's the relative strength index. So if the strength is oversold, technically that is a lot of sell pressure, right? So at this point, honestly, and this might scare a lot of people, I think the best thing Bitcoin could do right now is absolutely nuke to 40K. In the next couple of weeks, I'm not saying I think that's going to happen. I think it'll take a while. I have had 40K on my radar, you guys, for about 3 months now. I still believe that we are on our way to that level, but I would, based on typical market structure and timing of a cycle, I would expect that to happen sometime in, early October, if I want to be exact. That is just basically going by analyzing the time frame of previous cycles, right? Generally, we form a bottom 204 weeks later. That is where we form our next bottom on the next cycle. So obviously that can change. That does not have to play out the exact same this time. But so far, people claiming that the 4-year cycle is over and all this sort of stuff, or that it's broken. No, it's just that people think it's literally a 4-year cycle and it's not exactly 4 years. So what it is exactly 204 weeks. So yeah, at this point, if that ends up happening, I would expect a bottom basically early October. But like I said, I think the best thing that crypto could do would just be, instead of waiting for that time, just flush and hit the actual support level. The reason why I say the actual support level, you guys know, I wasn't actually taking this support level back here very serious at all. And my reason was just because we already lost this micro trend up here. And generally when that happens, just like I said earlier in the stream, I treat the 5 minute, the 1 hour, the 4 hour, the daily, the weekly, I treat market structure the same. If this was a 5 minute chart setup, I would be looking for that Stuber fib entry starting at the 786, 886. And when we look at a full market cycle, that lines up around 39, 40K, somewhere in there. This is not to try and spread FUD. This is trying to prepare you for, not saying that, YOLO into an all-in short right now and expect this target. It's nothing like that, you guys. I'm just trying to be realistic about the charts, and so that you can make a plan for if this happens, right? I have no idea if we're going to bottom at 40K at the start of October, but if that price lines up with those dates, I know exactly what I'm going to do. and it's going to be buy as much crypto as I possibly can. On spot, right? And that's obviously, I don't like catching the knife on leverage. I like to wait for a trend to form or wait for a reversal signal with a tight invalidation. But as far as spot buying, if we end up coming down to the super fib, I would absolutely, even if it happens in the next couple of weeks, everyone will be saying that Bitcoin's dead for the 1400th time. And if we get down to these levels, I will absolutely be catching that knife on spot, right? On leverage, I would at least want to see some sort of a setup on a 5-minute chart, like a typical 5-minute Stuber fib setup. And at that point, I would very, very much so be looking to be long in the market. But we'll have to see what happens, obviously. Looking at the 4-hour, and just to show you how, I mean, guys, this trade is currently, it's close to a 700% profit right now. It's a 25x short that I took up here. But again, it was just a typical Stuber fib setup. There was nothing magical to that. Well, unless you think the Stubers are magic, obviously. But this was just basic market structure, right? Everyone was saying on social media how bullish we are, all-time highs, here we come. And people celebrate at resistance, right? Generally speaking, retail loves to FOMO into resistance with longs, just like they love to FOMO into shorts at support. But if we look at the market structure, we had this low, we had this lower low. This is the highest point between the two. There's our confirmed lower high on the 4-hour trend. And if I pull a fib from there down to our low, notice where we got rejected. We filled that 786, 886 fib pocket absolutely perfectly. Unfortunately, I only had an entry at the 786. I never had one at the 886. I don't know why. At the time, I just decided not to, apparently. But yeah, either way, beautiful trade, right? A typical Stuber fib there. And even here, you guys, like I said, you start to see that once you start to see this structure, you start to see it everywhere. But even here, let's say lower low, we got a little bounce, lower low. Here's our confirmed lower high. Pull a fib from our lower high. Look where we end up getting rejected, right in that fib pocket. We wicked a little higher, candle bodies closing right in that fib pocket, big rejection. Even here, we had another one, right? Low, lower low, confirmed lower high. Pull a fib from our confirmed lower high to our lower low, and it was basically a perfect double top. But once again, the candle bodies closing in that level, that's where we got our rejection. Never came close to our 115 invalidation. You start to see these all the time. I joke about it. I mean, those of you guys, especially a while back, you guys know that I used to joke about this all the time, that I see Stuber fib setups everywhere. That's not just in the charts. I see it when I look at buildings. One's taller than the other. I'll see a Stuber fib there. If trees, my friends, my family, you know, looking at them, looking at heights and stuff. Like, you just start to notice this shit. Absolutely. Yeah. Songs, that's more so my name. Just to ruin music for you guys. Anytime you hear you in a song, throw Stu in there. You're welcome. But yeah, we see this kind of structure form all the time, you guys. And one of the reasons why I'm not overly bullish, like right now, looking at the 4-hour, a lot of people might want to pull this as a Stuber fib. Now, I do agree that there is potential support basically starting around 63K down to 58K approximately. However, you guys, this is not a Stuber. Right? It's different. There is potential support for a double bottom retest or whatever, sure. But if we look at the structure, this was our micro low, this wick here. That was our bounce. This is our next bounce. That's our lower low. That means our confirmed lower high on the trend is way up at about 77K. And until that breaks, there is not an official Stuber fib, right? So I would actually prefer to see Bitcoin break this level, then retest support. At that point, I would be thinking that the market looks very good, and I would be very excited to long something like that, just because it would look something like that, right? But we don't have that structure right now. To be fair, on the lower time frames we do, right? If we look at the 5-minute, for example, that would absolutely fit the criteria. But just being that the 4-hour looks more so like this, I just don't want to get too bullish, even if we do find support here. If that happens, once again, just really be careful about that 77K level. In fact, at this point, I'm just going to map this out. That is our range, right? That's our confirmed range, just because this is obviously still our bottom, and that's our confirmed lower high on the trend. Until one of those breaks, we are still in this range. We can do whatever Bitcoin wants to do here. It doesn't matter. We're still in that range until one of those two levels break. So at this point, that's kind of what I'm looking at. Again, just like in my pro signals post there, the MDX Trendmaster on the 4 hour, just notice how that was another reason for my short up here that I was just talking about, is notice that it was right around where we had our sell signal. We had lost our buy signal on the MDX Trendmaster, so coming and retesting the sell trend, this blue line basically. It also lined up very close with my Stuber fib setup. So just looking at this trending indicator, right? The trend master, it's obviously a trending indicator. That has just been a vicious downtrend. And this thing has pointed out just beautiful resistance along the way. Even where we ended up getting rejected here, right? Where we've so far set our top. We tested that indicator absolutely perfectly and got rejected. So at this point, I still really think we're on our way down to at least 63K. Obviously doesn't have to happen, but I'm more than happy to hold on to my short positions at this time, because I obviously stop loss at break even because I've been paying myself on my shorts, but I'm more than happy to let it run. I have zero FOMO for the upside right now. I'll still take some long opportunities if I see a bullish Stuber that I can get into a scalp, and then if it turns into a runner with half the position, fantastic. But I just don't have a lot of high hopes for that at this point. So yeah, basically until I at least see some sort of a micro lower high broken here. Taking a look at the long short ratio, well, you can see that once again, as soon as retail starts longing aggressively, right, we start seeing these long positions building once again, and that's exactly when we start dumping, right? Generally speaking, as soon as retail decides to get FOMO and start longing the market, that is liquidity for the market makers to just absolutely wreck everybody, right? So I wouldn't really expect to see much of a recovery unless when we get down to these support levels, if we get down to support and we see the retail shorts start climbing, at that point, if retail starts building shorts into support, that is where they will get wrecked again, and that would give us that liquidity to push the market to the upside, basically. So we'll have to see what happens there, but yeah, as it looks right now, I mean, retail guys, so here's something else I want to mention just while I'm looking at this chart, you guys. When I look at social media, when I'm on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, when I'm on YouTube, like everybody is saying that everybody in the market is bearish, therefore we need to be bullish. But so many people are saying that, does that not mean that many people are bullish? And also, if they want to say, like, this is actually kind of funny. If that's true, if everybody is actually bearish on the market right now, this is a whole new level of FOMO that's unheard of, because 70% of retail is longing this market while they're bearish. That's a whole level of interesting mental gymnastics to bring yourself to do that, right? That's meaning that even though you're assuming it's going to go down because it looks bearish, you still have so much FOMO just in case there's a bounce, that everybody is still willing to be on the long side of things. So, that's, in my opinion, that's something very worth considering when you see so many people talking about how bearish they are on the market, and then judging for yourself and having that same thought process, right? There's a lot of people here who probably look at social media and think, well, everyone is bearish right now. That's just what you're seeing in your feed. When you look at an indicator like this, you can see what retail's actually doing, and only 30% of people, 29.9% of people are actually putting their money where their mouth is with those bearish theories, right? Me being one of them. I have been very much so favoring the short side of things since October. And that was actually 2 days before the October 10th crash is where I started talking about. Actually, it was literally, we had a live stream here, you guys, actually, the day before the October 10th crash. And I was talking about the fact that, where was it? Let's go. Oh, there it is. The big ugly, the big beautiful. I think we were trading where it would have been right in here. I remember we were live streaming, or I was live streaming. Some of you guys were here with me. We were live streaming right here, and I was talking about a potential drop to, I think it was probably around 110K, just because I was looking at, again, just a typical Stuber fib, right? I thought it was very likely we end up dropping to this level just because of basic market structure, right? People are saying this crash was unpredictable. Well, guys, we lost, we had our high here, higher high there. We lost this higher low. Structure was broken days in advance. And then that capitulation event happened. So some of us were ready for that. And I know there was a bunch of liquidations down here. I don't know if it would still show it. There used to be a way thicker amount of liquidations in this area. And that is exactly why I was talking about during that stream that I thought it was quite likely we dropped there. Now, to be fair, I thought that was going to take about 2 months, not 2 hours. Or, well, I guess it was more than 2 hours, but a big chunk of the move happened within a few minutes, basically. But it was just looking at things with a level head. I wasn't trying to scare anybody. It was just, hey, you know what? There's a lot of liquidity down there. You know what? We broke structure. You know what? We have support as a potential retest significantly lower. All those things were just kind of lining up. And that's one thing to consider right now, actually bringing up the liquidations indicator. Now, yeah, exactly. I remember you're short from 123. I think I remember having one from 125.2. I accidentally closed it one day. I mean, it was a beautiful short, and it was weeks later that I closed it, but I wish I still had it as a trophy. But, and I know this is something that we've talked about in the past with, liquidation levels being easy money, a easy move in the market. That's not necessarily true, you guys. Although it's worth, looking at an indicator like this, like the MDX liquidations indicator. All these yellow, gold, brown bars here, that's all the higher leverage liquidations. The blues and the greens, those are all lower leverage. So all of the higher leverage liquidations are technically above us at this point. The thing is, it wouldn't take much to drive FOMO into this market, and we do see longs building currently, that all of a sudden we start to see more liquidation levels forming below us. The fact that there is, I agree, there is a lot more liquidity to the upside than the downside, but there is still some to the downside, right? So it's still possible that we grab it. Just something to consider. I like looking at this indicator, if anything, to help me avoid FOMO, right? When I see these, it's if I don't want to get completely married to my bearish opinion, because it is possible this downtrend breaks eventually, right? There's a ton of liquidity up there. It would make sense. But at that point, I'm just going to lock in more profits from my shorts anyways. So we will see what happens with that. ALGO Master, do we have... So the ALGO Master currently pointing out a massive Stuber fib. So guys, the ALGO Master indicator actually has automatic Stuber fib pulls. I don't always agree with them totally, so it's still important. I use this more as confluence rather than, just taking every single one that it ends up pulling. It's still important to understand how market structure works with one of those fib pulls while using this indicator. I love when it lines up with what I'm seeing, though, and this would be one of those cases, right? The fact that we obviously lost structure right here, because we had this higher high, we had a little uptrend there, and we ended up breaking it, and we're just in a nasty downtrend since. So I do agree with this fib pull from here to here currently. Obviously, that would extend if we end up setting new lows. So, yeah, basically at this point, I personally think that, we are in a full-on bear market. I feel like even if we see a strong bounce, we are likely going to set a lower high of some kind. I really don't see us smashing through all-time highs anytime soon. I would be more expecting something like this, where even if we got a very strong bounce, let's say in this example would be up to about 89 or 90K, there's going to be a lot of FOMO in the market. A lot of people are going to be celebrating that all-time highs are right around the corner and all that sort of stuff. But just understand, guys, when we're in such a strong downtrending market for the last 4 months, just even if you're not shorting resistance, just respect it, right? If you're in a long, take some profits at resistance. Even if you want to hedge some shorts, or if you're more like me and comfortable shorting and that kind of thing, then that's more so. I'd rather be shorting at resistance rather than longing into resistance, right? I'd always rather sell at resistance and buy at support, no matter how it looks, because support always looks weak, and at resistance the price always looks strong. That's just how our emotions work. That's just how it is. I can absolutely look at River 5-minute. After I look at this though, guys, this is something interesting as well. So let's talk about some bullish points about the market. I like I said, I'll give credit where credit is due. One is we do have that potential support if we come back down and retest. Two, on the weekly, the RSI being oversold, it is possible that even if we end up dumping aggressively to the downside, in that case, I think it would be short-lived, where we could start to trade sideways and start to recover the market a little bit, basically. What else? Oh, and this could be very nice for the market. Maybe not Bitcoin itself, but the market in general. You guys know that I have looked at this many times over the last couple of months, the Bitcoin dominance chart. And right now it is looking like it wants to roll over. If the Bitcoin dominance just starts plunging, that could be very nice for the altcoin market. So I don't want to necessarily get locked into bearish mode. I think that altcoins could be an interesting play, but obviously I'm not going to be the guy to say that, oh, it's altcoin season, oh, we're about to go parabolic, oh, altcoins are about to 100x. I have no idea what they're going to do. I'm just saying that if Bitcoin dominance continues to drop, then looking for those long opportunities on altcoins may be basically a good strategy to have, right? I'm still very interested in shorting Bitcoin, but for the most part, when it comes to longs, I'm almost more interested in altcoins right now, just because, although, yes, if Bitcoin's dumping, obviously altcoins are going to follow, and more aggressively, right? So that doesn't mean I'm going to YOLO into longs at any given time. However, if Bitcoin is starting to hit support and then altcoins are also starting to hit support, at that point, I would expect altcoins to get a much more aggressive bounce than Bitcoin. So that's where I think there's some good opportunities to be made in the altcoin market. And even, honestly, even if we go full on bear market, you guys, and altcoins just absolutely nuke even further, then you know what? Great volatility for potential trades. But obviously, whenever you're getting into trades, and this goes for Bitcoin, this goes for altcoins, it goes for everything, you guys, always understand whenever you're taking a trade, know approximately how much money you are going to lose if things backfire on you, right? Very important to have that kind of understanding. What else? Yeah, so from here, yeah, that's Bitcoin dominance. Let's take a look at River. I will look at hype after River. Oh, interesting. This is the daily chart. That is interesting to see us blasting past this wick here. That's a nice bullish engulfing candle there. I wish there was some sort of a lower high that was broken. Let's zoom in a little bit. What's the 4 hour looking? Oh, interesting. So even though this is just a wick, this is where, again, looking at microstructure, looking at the 4 hour on river here, this is where we had our low. We had our little bounce, set a lower low, confirm this as our lower high because it's the highest point between the two. And even though this was just a wick, so therefore this would have been a successful swing fail, played out bearishly. However, that does open us up to a potential bullish range, right? The fact that even though it was just very temporary and just a wick like that, we could pull a fib, something like that, and look where we ended up finding support, right? Right in that Stuber fib pocket, the 786, 886. One concern that I would have about this trend is that it's obviously this range has played out, right? We got right back to the top of this range. Obviously hit those bullish targets, the range targets. We could look at the more immediate range, in which case we'd be looking at this as our high, this is our higher high, this is the lowest point between the two. That's my confirmed higher low on the trend. So if I pull a fib like that, although I would say this is bullish structure, just understand that we could come back all the way to about $17. Really, even all that's so volatile. When things are that volatile, I mean, that's where it gets dangerous when you're looking at ranges this big, you guys, is support goes all the way from $17 down to about $13.72. So that is a huge support range, but that is just how structure is, right? Our Stuber fib is basically from $17 down to $16.10 approximately. But then we also have a potential bullish swing fail where if we lost and reclaimed this level, that basically runs from $15.08 down to that $13.72. So ideally, wouldn't even lose that green line, right? I would love to see support come in before $15, basically, to at least show that we're printing higher lows rather than setting a potential lower low, where even if we got a bounce at that point, I would start to have concerns on the resistance retest. Let's look at the 1 hour. See, the thing is, when we zoom in, can even zoom in further. Let's see what this looks like on the 5 minute. So obviously on the 5 minute, you can actually see this structure much clearer because there was actually a candle body close above. But same thing, right? It would still be that same fib pull. Yeah, same structure, right? Just zoomed out a little here. So yeah, I mean, I would say that river looks strong right now. It looks like it broke out of this real tight consolidation. We could even draw out some sort of a beautiful wedge there. Look how beautiful that was, actually. Wow. That is nice structure. Not everybody likes trading trend lines. I like trend lines if they have certain criteria. For me, I need to see 3 exact touch points before a breakout, and ideally evenly spaced apart. Boom, we have those factors. And then we ended up breaking out and retesting that old resistance as new support. That's just a beautiful, beautiful breakout right there. So the fact that we broke out of that tight range, obviously broke horizontal levels, broke diagonal levels, retested support after a downtrend break was broken. This still looks good to me. It's just that we have to understand that a pullback to retest support on the trend could be, it could very likely end up happening, right? So those pullbacks will happen, and being this is so volatile, like how big is this range? Percentage wise, that's a 60% range right there. That's massive. So again, as I was just talking about earlier, always know how much money you stand to lose on a trade. So find out where your average entry is going to be, find out where your stop loss would be, find out what that percentage move actually is before you're picking, your margin amount and your leverage amount and stuff like that, right? Very important for risk management. And speaking of risk management, just for those of you guys who are new here, I personally avoid cross leverage at all costs. Slippage can be a real bugger, but at least if you're on isolated leverage, then worst case, you know what happens is you get liquidated on the amount that's isolated to that position. Because I've told this story before, you guys, that I was trading, I think it was on MEXC. I was trading there and I had a position open on an altcoin. I bumped my stop loss into a 20% profit and that position got liquidated. Never got stopped out. It got liquidated when the stop loss was in a 20% profit. So that just goes to show what can happen with basically with a little slippage, especially on altcoins with low trading volume and that sort of thing. It does happen. So at least in that case, with my experience, yeah, I got liquidated on a trade, but it was not my account. It was just an isolated trade position, and I was very thankful at that point that that's how I trade, because then it never dipped into my spot in my account and, you know, all my other funds, basically. Right. Oh yeah, Barra. I saw. I will check out Barra. First, I'm gonna check out Hype, as promised. Hype is. I had this other Stuber mapped out, and we are respecting the shit out of it. Absolutely beautiful. That is just a textbook Stuber. It's about halfway to its first target already. But yeah, very typical setup there, right? We have our high here, and we have a higher high. Lowest point between the two right here. There's our Stuber fib pull. Look where we end up finding support. So far looks like we're setting a bit of an engulfing bullish candle here. Like, yeah, that Hype looks great to me. The thing is, part of me was still expecting Hype to retest support down here, which is kind of why I avoided this setup. I should have taken something on lower leverage. Could have had an average entry right in the middle of the pocket, but I didn't. But part of me was expecting that, hey, if we end up losing this support, there could be an even better entry, basically something like this from where the swing actually began from, in which case I thought it was quite possible that we end up dropping significantly lower. But yeah, so far even just looking at the micro trend for Hype on the 4 hour, that's beautiful looking structure right now. First target for me would be basically $32.90. Second target would be about $36. Well, yeah, about $36. Whenever I'm in a position like that, like I said, I never did take this long. But if I was in a position on this, I always front run my fibs a little bit. Always front run them. Except the invalidation. I do the opposite. I leave extra wiggle room. Not much, but a little extra, because so often on this kind of a setup, we'll do a swing fail right down to the 115 and then end up forming an uptrend from there. But yeah, Hype still looks good, right? Ever since basically, so Hype is one of those coins, and I really wish I had an alert set for this because I was talking about it in advance and everything. But something to watch for on a lot of altcoins is if they are going to fill the wick from October 10th, right? If we can end up basically filling those wicks and reclaiming those levels, just like Hype did here, you quite often get some very, very aggressive moves from there. And this is just a perfect example. I mean, from reclaiming that level, what did we end up pumping? 80% to the upside. Absolutely huge. And since there, I mean, obviously this is now our confirmed bullish pivot at this point. So I'm actually going to drop this line just so that this can be our new reference for where the market low is at this point. Thing of beauty. Taking profit is a very important part of risk management. Absolutely. And even, like I said at the start of the stream, not only does taking profit take profit, obviously, but even if you're not updating your stop loss, for example, at that point yet, at least if you take profits at some profit levels, that's a cushion for if you end up getting stopped out on your position. And if you get stopped out, you're getting stopped out on a smaller position, right? Bera, yeah, that one absolutely exploded, hey? Ugh. And I see the structure. I see the structure Y. Here we had our low because we had a little bounce there. This is obviously micro analyzing, but on the daily, boom, we end up getting a candle close above that confirmed lower high on the trend and absolutely moon to the upside. That is a thing of beauty right there. What side? How high did it? Geez, 180%. Well, even since breaking that resistance level, 180% move, absolutely huge. So yeah, obviously that'll be a dangerous one with leverage because it will be massive ranges. So at this point, one thing that's tough about this right now is based on the structure. I would say this is our high, this is our higher high. Whatever our lowest point in here is, basically here would be our confirmed higher low on the trend. This is not a higher low for me because we never broke another higher high, right? We never set a new higher high, so we did not confirm this as a higher low, whereas here we did, right? High, higher high, lowest point between the two is confirmed. So that being said, let's remove a couple of these guys. So looking for a typical range continuation or trend continuation kind of a setup, we are getting quite close to the 786 now, which would be, well, down around 62.8 cents, somewhere in there. So still another 13% to the downside. This is obviously where it gets dangerous, is invalidation is, well, it's over 60% to the downside because this range is so big here. So to look for any hopes of finding a valid setup for me here, I would need to zoom into a shorter time frame. Like if we end up trading into this 4-hour support zones, then looking for, let's say, a 5-minute bullish reversal setup inside that zone, then I would be interested in playing something like that. As it stands right now, yeah, that's pretty dangerous with how big that range is. And also, something to consider here, you guys, is that this is one of those unfortunate ways, well, just unfortunate market structure has shaped here just because of where support formed here. But also, if we end up invalidating that, we technically have just a very slightly bigger range since we have the actual pivot of the swing just very slightly lower. So that's where from here invalidation is actually even further. It's like 75% away. So that's absolutely ridiculous. It's pretty much impossible to trade something like that other than spot or, like I said, looking at shorter time frames kind of a thing. But yeah, unfortunately, just how the structure formed, we have two different ranges which kind of overlap. Just very slightly different because this would be the trend continuation and this would be from the swing point, basically. Let's take a look at the 5-minute. Maybe there's something a little more obvious here. There was a little mini Stuber here that played out, I think. Again, just looking at microstructure, but low, lower, low, lower, high. We end up breaking that, pull a fib. No, we tested the 786 perfectly, and look at that, we got a nice little trend to the upside. But obviously that easy scalp type of move, and honestly that's again, not everyone's going to want to trade something like that, but we'd have potential support even if this is where our bullish reversal point is. At this point we could basically pull a fib something like this, right? And we actually got pretty close to the 786. We haven't tested it yet, but there is potential support here. That being said, if we would end up getting back up to some of these take profit levels, specifically that one up there, I would start to have concerns already, because there is this potential break, right? Even though it's just a wick, we have that low, lower low. So at that point, we could have this as a confirmed bearish pivot, and we could be looking at a short something like that. If we end up coming up to the 786, 886, there's a potential scalp short there. I don't know how I feel about shorting this guy, being it went so crazy to the upside there. That's just a dangerous one all around. That's all I can say about Barra right now. How am I feeling about an Ethereum long around the low around 1740? Let's take a look at Ethereum. What time for that? 4 hour? Yeah. First of all, I'm actually going to zoom out just because you can see that we have tested the 886 on the weekly. So technically we're in very, very macro support. So that is some. I don't actually have a position open here. This is from a old stream or something. Yeah, I mean, we're right in a macro Stuber fib pocket. Man, it's just unfortunate that Ethereum is doing the exact same thing as Bitcoin. Basically, looking at the microstructure on the 4 hour, here was the last two lows, right? Therefore, our confirmed lower high on the trend is right there. And notice what we had. What do you know? A perfect 786, 886 fib pocket fill there. Nice little Stuber rejection there. Obviously, that bearish setup has already hit the first target. Second target would be the 214, which would be closer to 1836. Even call it 1840. Yeah, I don't know how. I feel very similar with Ethereum right now as I do to Bitcoin. I think it's very possible that we get some sort of a. It's very possible that we bottom there. I mean, we could end up finding support there and absolutely blasting off. It's possible. It's just I would feel so much more confident with that if this push would have broke that lower high and then came down and retested support. I would have felt way better about that. As it stands right now, I have my concerns on that. I feel like this is just a gut feeling. This isn't this isn't something to enter a trade on by any means. But just like Bitcoin, I'm going to show it on Bitcoin. I have a feeling, again, this isn't something to necessarily take a trade on, but I really feel like we're going to come down a little further, retest our support levels, see a bounce, and maybe hold it for a few days kind of a thing, and then end up continuing the trend lower. Basically, we just, like I said earlier, this is the range. Our range is currently basically 59.8K up to about 77K. And until either the highs or the lows of this range breaks, that is the range that we're stuck in. Just like Ethereum right now, until we either break above basically 2200 or below 1740 until we break one of those levels. That's just the range that we're in. Later, Lensby. So yeah, anyways, legends, I think that's about all I wanted to go over today. So hopefully you found this stream